Good evening, everyone. I know that some of y'all had asked about divination in one of the posts about things that y'all wanted to learn about. And one of the easiest ways that most people start learning is by using tarot cards or oracle decks or even runes. And some people, if you're lucky enough to understand it, they use stones and bones. I personally have never used stones and bones. I started off with a tarot deck in my teens. And, I got a book like everybody else did and, tried to learn about the cards. And from there, it gave me some insight when it come to helping others and, reading a deck from the cards that I pulled. And from there, I learned about the runes. Now, don't get me wrong, runes were a form of writing back in Old Norse when they used those type of younger Futhark. And before that, it was Elder Futhark. And, I'm sure they used, that was mentioned in Tacitus, they would use branches and slice them and use them for divination. And some of those techniques are still used today because, we still cut limbs and, make runes out of them and whatnot. And for me, divination, yes, it does work. And the longer you learn to understand it, it kind of works hand in hand if you have a gift of foresight. And I know some people have it, some people don't. And to me, using, tarot cards or oracle decks or runes are an easy way to help you tap into them. And then when over time, you can move on to using runes, or it may even come to the point where you don't even need those things, or, ever even pick up stones and bones. And for me, because of the fact that, I was gifted with being able to have visions, and keep in mind that my visions work very differently. I could have somebody, tell me a story, and it'll play in my mind like it's a movie. And it's like I see the past and the present and what the possible future may be. And you have to remember, the future is ever changing. It's kind of like a river. You may go to the same spot in a river, but it won't be the same water that was there before. And to me, that's a good metaphor for explaining that for somebody that's trying to learn about divination and visions and using those tools for divination. Because I believe that life is ever changing, and so are we, and the path that we walk is ever changing just by little ripples that we make in our life. However, when people would tell me a story, I'd see the past, the present, and the possible future, because it's always ever changing. And with that being said, if you are blessed with the ability to have foresight, to be able to have visions, they're very different for every person. Sometimes it could be done through a story, or they could just be sitting somewhere and they'll just have a little vision, or they have it in their dreams of something that's going to happen, and then later on it will repeat itself in everyday life from that dream or that vision. And to me, I think it's very interesting because it's not very often talked about, when it comes to visions and divination. Because, you hear about people, that are witches or seers or, whatever you would like to call those people, or, psychics, mediums, whatnot in the modern term. But to me, I think they're so interesting because each person has their gifts for those things that are divination. And they kind of go hand in hand with everyday life. Yes, I do believe that they are an ancestral gift that's given to them by their ancestor. And it takes time to really hone in on those gifts. And some people, it comes naturally to, where others, not so much. Some people may take their whole entire life to even grasp or understand them. And I used to have them more often when I was younger, before I became a mother. Because, being a mother, there's a lot of things that go on your everyday life that distracts you, and, you're busy with a family, or, you could be busy with work, or you're, starting a new career. There's many different factors that, can dampen them, even, mental health issues that may cause them too. However, I've learned that if you find quiet time in your everyday life, for meditation, or, to be very solitary in your practices, you have an easier way of honing in those gifts, to practice divination or to connect with that gift that you were born with. But, as I said, learning about divination through tarot decks, oracle decks, runes, or stones and bones are a good starter. So later on in life, you can connect with being able just to have those visions in everyday life without using different tools to help you with that. And yes, I can still use tarot cards or runes. And yes, I will get an answer of what I'm looking for to help somebody else that, needs a reading or whatnot. And I've had them come true with the cards or the runes that I've used. And they've been pretty spot on 99.9% of the time. But my visions do also the same thing as, tarot and runes do. However, this is from my experience from what I have learned, over the past 16 years of not just being a Norse pagan, but, a pagan in general. And, trying to understand how divination works and to find a greater understanding and ways to explain that to others to help them learn and grow into their practices and making them an everyday life. So, with that being said, I would love to hear your thoughts or any questions that you may have about this and everything. So, I hope y'all have a great evening, and I will talk to y'all later.